2nd Marine Raider Battalion attacks the Japanese radio station and seaplane base on Batari Island, Macon Atoll. The 44-man Japanese garrison all died. The Japanese realized the foremost islands in their defensive perimeter must be reinforced. Yokosuka 6th Special Naval Landing Force arrives at Tarawa Atoll, relieving the company from 62nd Guard Force. 111th Encampment Corps arrives on Badio to construct defenses. U.S. planes observe an airfield on Badio Island, Tarawa Atoll. Yokosuka 6th SNLF on Badio Tarawa Atoll redesignated 3rd Special Base Force and assigned command of Gilbert, Nauru, and Ocean Islands. Rear Admiral Tomonari, an experienced engineer, takes command of 3rd Special Base Force to oversee construction of defenses. 14 coastal defense guns, including 4 Vickers 8-inch guns mounted in concrete bunkers, cover the approaches into the lagoon to force an attack to come from the open waters on the western or southern beaches, where it can be stopped in the water or pinned on the beaches. While the U.S. landing force is tied down, the Japanese combined fleet will launch a waylaying attack to defeat the assault. Priority of work is south or ocean side, west, and lastly, north lagoon side. The Fringe barrier coral reef protects against invasion during low tide. Pyramidal concrete obstacles with rail spikes are 100 yards out from the high tide line. Mines, coconut log barrier fence on ocean side of the island, double apron barbed wire fences 10 yards from high tide line. 20-foot inland from the high tide line is also a coconut log wall 4 to 5 feet tall, filled behind with coral or sand. Every 5 to 20 feet is a bunker, with 30 inches of sand between 2 walls of the coconut logs or reinforced with concrete, and firing pits connected by trenches. Coconut logs are fibrous, strong, and resist splintering when hit by high explosive rounds. 10 yards behind the seawall are large 10 to 12 foot tall steel concrete pillboxes with 4 to 10 firing ports every 10 to 20 yards. Some have machine guns, others accommodate 20 to 150 troops. 40 artillery pieces are located around the island in various reinforced firing pits. 30 foot behind are rifle trenches. 6 foot deep, 12 foot wide anti-tank ditches are inland. The interior of the island has command posts and shelters to protect the troops from air attack and naval bombardment. The shelters are large and well vented but do not have firing ports. Trenches and tunnels connect all points of the island, allowing troops to move undercover. All told, there are 500 pillboxes. The island being nearly flat provides an unobstructed field of fire. The SACEBO 7th Special Naval Landing Force arrives on Badio Tarawa. 4th Fleet Construction Detachment arrives on Tarawa. Rear Admiral Skibowski, an experienced combat officer, takes command of 3rd Special Base Force. Skibowski strictly enforced military discipline and starts intense, rigid training from dawn to dusk. The troops' strength improves tremendously and with the resulting psychological lift. Skibowski encourages his troops by saying it will take 1 million men 100 years to conquer Tarawa. The U.S. War Department Joint Chiefs direct preparation of plans to seize the 16 atolls of the Gilbert Islands as a stepping stone to the Mariana Islands, from where B-29 superfortresses can reach Japan. Shortages of shipping and logistics prevent the operation before mid-November. Admiral Nimitz, SINCPAC Commander-in-Chief Pacific Ocean Areas, directs Admiral Spruance to get the hell in and get the hell out, as the Japanese are capable of making a combined air, surface, with 10 battleships, 7 cruisers, and submarine attack on an invasion fleet within 3 days, and U.S. carrier forces are logistically weak and global shipping resources are stretched to the limit. The Japanese are believed to be able to mass far more aircraft over the Gilbert Islands than the U.S. could. After the atoll is secure, defense forces and shore-based air will occupy the islands, replacing the assault troops. Japanese Navy tactics emphasize night attacks. Aircraft and submarines precede the ships to locate the enemy. Cruiser float planes or land-based bombers drop float lights to mark enemy ship locations, and parachute flares to eliminate them. Lookouts using 12 or 18 centimeter polarized binoculars would spot the enemy ships. Destroyers and cruisers would fire Type 93 torpedoes. After expected torpedo runtime, star shells are fired to further illuminate targets for the gun battle. Admiral Spluance flies down to Wellington, New Zealand to meet with 2nd Marine Division Commander General Smith and give informal verbal orders for Operation Galvanic. Landings in the Solomon Islands were unopposed. In the Gilberts, the Japanese are dug in to defend at the shore. 75 minutes of naval gunfire bombardment and 2 airstrikes will precede the landing. Landing beaches Red 1, Red 2, and Red 3, each 600 yards long, on the lagoon or north side of Badio are selected. Green Beach is a contingency landing beach on the west shore, and Black Beaches 1 and 2 the south shore. In November, there are unpredictable dodging tides at Tarawa, and the water may not be deep enough at low tide for fully loaded LCVPs and LCMs to pass over the Fringe Reef around Badio. Plus, there are anti-boat and wire obstacles between the reef and shore. The solution is to use the division's landing vehicle Track 1 supply vehicles. The 2nd Amphibian Battalion could make only 75 of its 100 LVTs that were worn out at Guadalcanal operational. The LVTs would have to be armored to go in through enemy fire. 2nd Mardiv starts amphibious training. Even though the division saw combat at Guadalcanal, only about half the troops are veterans because of casualties and those sent back to the States with malaria. M1 rifles, M1 carbines, and M1918A2 BARs have replaced all the small arms in the division. The assault companies are issued 4 MU handheld radios. Each battalion has 2 engineer platoons with 6 flamethrowers and demolition kits, and 1 attached air liaison and naval gunfire jeep with a TCS radio. The air liaison officer and shore fire control officer will contact the Air Support Command unit on the flagship for close air support and gunfire support. Marines will mark the front line with colored panels so planes will know where not to attack. The division has all its authorized Navajo code talkers. USN and Army aircraft start 2 days of bombing and photographing Badio Island, Tarawa Atoll. After 2 days sailing, the combined fleet arrived at Etowantok Atoll for training and to be in position to intercept any attacks by American carriers in the vicinity of Wake Island and Marshall Islands area. With no American activity, the fleet returned to Truk on 23 September. The USN carrier attack on Wake Island destroys 22 planes, leaving the Japanese with just 12 for scouting. This limits scouting to 4 planes daily in a sector approximately 60 to 110 degrees from Tarawa Island to a distance of 600 or 700 miles, leaving the approaches to the Marshall Gilbert Islands unguarded. The USN mounts another carrier raid and naval bombardment of Wake Island to make the Japanese believe the island is to be invaded. Admiral Koga, Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet, issues alert order for Measure 1 of the Hawaii operation. Aircraft will transfer from the Southeast Area Force to the Inner Sea South Sea Force, and all attack planes from the Northeast Area Force will advance to Marcus Islands. Until the U.S. attacks, the 22nd Air Flotilla in the Marshalls is dispersed as far as possible. Planes at advanced bases are limited to those for patrols. Remaining air units are to conduct ship attack training. When U.S. attack, all air units will concentrate for airstrikes. 350 U.S. planes strike Japanese bases at Revolve, beginning a series of attacks. Captain Duran of APA-2 USS Harris reports results of landing trials of modified LVT-1s and M4 tanks on the reef near the entrance to Suga Harbor, Fuji Islands, determined entirely feasible to land both light and medium tanks under these conditions. Tanks operated normally on reef as on rocky ground. Amphibian tractors climbed on and off reef with Grady with entire ease. Japanese submarine I-36's scout plane flew over Pearl Harbor and reports 4 aircraft carriers, 4 battleships, 5 cruisers, and 17 destroyers moored. The Japanese combined fleet arrived at the Wake Marshall Islands area because radio intercepts indicated another American attack on Wake Island. I-36 reports a large convoy south of the Hawaiian Islands. I-19, 35, 169, and 175 are ordered to intercept the convoy. Company A, 1st of the 2nd Amphibian Tractor Battalion arrives in American Samoa to pick up the 50 new LVT-2s and conduct training, then join the convoy on the way to the Gilberts. With no American activity, the combined fleet sailed for Wake Island and then returned to Truk on 26 October. 2nd Marine Division operation order is completed. 2nd Marine Regiment landing team will be first wave. 3-2 Marines, as 3rd Battalion, 2nd Regiment, have Beach Red 1. 2-2 Marines, Beach Red 2, and 2-8 Marines, Beach Red 3. Company C of 1st Corps Medium Tank Battalion will land with the troops. Reserves will be committed only on order. 2nd Mardiv begins embarking for what the troops believe is a landing exercise in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. It took weeks to find enough armor plate for the LVTs. The Wellington, New Zealand General Motors plant put on extra shifts to cut up the plate and bolt it to the front and sides of the cabs. 250 caliber machine guns and 2 grapple hooks on the stern to rip out wire obstacles were added at the same time. Modifications to the 75 LVTs are completed just before embarking. 3rd Mardiv invade Bougainville Island in the Solomons. Admiral Koga, commander of the combined fleet, orders the Shukaku, Zuikaku, and Zuihu carrier air groups 173 planes to Rabaul while the carriers return to Japan for 6 months to train new air groups. The Japanese 10th Cruiser and 3rd Destroyer Squadron are sent to attack the U.S. invasion fleet at Bougainville and encounters USN Task Force 39 in the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay. The Japanese withdraw after losing 2 sunk and 4 damaged versus 4 USN damaged ships. Admiral Koga orders 2nd Fleet to send 8 cruisers and 4 destroyers to attack the U.S. force at Bougainville. A B-24 spots the Japanese 2nd Fleet off the Admiralty Islands heading toward the western entrance of St. George Channel at Rabaul. Admiral Halsey orders Task Force 38 proceed maximum formation speed, launch all-out strike on shipping in Rabaul and north thereof, order targets, cruisers, destroyers, retire thereafter. LSD-1 USS Ashland leaves Namura, New Caledonia with Company C, 1st Corps Medium Tank Battalion, preloaded on LCM-3 tank fighters. Task Force 38 planes damage 8 of the Japanese cruisers and 2 destroyers, neutralizing the naval threat to the beachhead at Bougainville. LST 34, 242, and 243 with Company A, 1st to 2nd Amphib Tractor Battalion on board, leaves Pango Pango, American Samoa. The Marines lost 3 weeks working on the LVT-2s because they've been stored in the open at San Diego, California for 4 to 5 months. USN Seabees fitted 40 by 26-inch plates of 3/8-inch boilerplate to the cabs, a 50 caliber and a 30 caliber machine gun mount on the rear of the cab, and a 30 caliber aft. The Marines got 5 days to train. On the way to the Gilberts, the LSTs will stop at Huimira Atoll, Ellis Islands for the LTVs to conduct practice landings. USN planes attack Rabaul, sink 1 destroyer, and inflict damage on 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers. While the Navy aircraft are preparing to take off for a second strike, Japanese aircraft attack. By the end of the day, the Japanese lost 39 aircraft, plus innumerable others limped home with damage. The USN lost 14 planes, no ships damaged, 10 sailors injured. Since 7 October, U.S. strikes on Rabaul have destroyed 234 Japanese planes in the air and more on the ground. The USN Southern Attack Force, Task Force 53, leaves the Fiji for Tarawa. The USN has a new command organization for this battle. Naval gunfire, air support, and landing force operation is controlled from Admiral Hill's Task Force 53 flagship, the battleship USS Maryland, since no AGC amphibious force flagship is available yet. A couple of the Navy TBSs and mini Marine TBX radio telephones are scrounged for the 15 APA and AKA transports. The new and rare voice radios permit much faster communications than the old continuous wave Morse code sets. 350 to 400 USN and USAAF aircraft start daily strikes on Japanese bases in the Gilberts and Marshall Islands. Every Japanese 4th Fleet long-range aircraft is ordered to search for American ships in the Central Pacific. The riddled Shokaku and Zuikaku air groups are ordered withdrawn from Revolve to Truk. Fresh units are transferred from the Marshall Islands to relieve them. U.S. Navy aircraft flying 910 sorties against Badio, Nauru, Gillette, and Macon Islands. 4 U.S. ships en route to Macon are spotted by Japanese air patrol about 1700 hours. 25 planes are sent to attack, but only 3 find the ships and the attack is unsuccessful. 2 more U.S. fleets are spotted south of Tarawa. Admiral Koga CNC Combined Fleet ordered preparation for High Operation Number 3. U.S. aircraft strike Tarawa, Mili, Macon, and Nauru again. 3 U.S. Navy heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers bombard WWII Island, Tarawa Atoll, from 20,000 yards. The Japanese planes report a U.S. fleet south and northwest of Tarawa to the route Kijuan, which broadcasts the report. Aircraft are dispatched to attack the ships. 10 do not return. Under the pale light of a 3/4 moon, the lead ships of Task Force 5-3 arrive in the transport area Able off Tarawa. Radar picket destroyers take up stations 30,000 yards out to detect incoming Japanese aircraft. The APA and AKA transports arrive and start putting LCVPs, then LVT-1s in the water. There are always problems unloading by crane. LST 34, 242, and 243 hove into position and begin unloading LVT-2s. All LCVPs and LVTs have been launched. First wave Marines of Combat Landing Team start debarking into LCVPs, then cross deck to LVTs. A strong current pushed the transport south across the support group's line of sight and into range of Japanese guns on the west end of Badio. Admiral Hill Task Force Commander orders the transports to stop debarkation and move 2,000 yards north to correct the location. It takes time for U.S. Navy control officers to marshal the LCVPs and the LVTs into order and follow the ships. A red flare is fired from the center of Badio. The Japanese spot a battleship, 3 cruisers, and 6 destroyers at 18,000 meters on an azimuth of 320 degrees. On being informed of the U.S. ships at Badio, the commander of the Inter-South Seas Force orders air attack units to attack. Battleship USS Maryland launches the first of 2 Kingfisher spotter planes. One will spot gunfire, and the other reports on the landing force. The 2 surviving Japanese 8-inch guns on the southwest point fire at the red flash of the 5-inch blank shell that launches the planes. LSD-1 USS Ashland starts launching LCMs with the M4 tanks. Transports are repositioned and debarkation resumes. The Marines are having a hard time cross-decking from the LCVPs to the LVTs in the choppy seas. The support group battleships Colorado and Maryland commence counter-battery fire with 16-inch guns. The cruisers join in. LVTs and LCVPs leave the transport area on schedule in spite of breakdowns. Counter-battery fire ordered stopped for expected airstrike at 0545 hours. 3 of the 4 Japanese 8-inch guns have been knocked out. Admiral Hill's communications central on USS Maryland's flag bridge was about the same level as the muzzles of the 16-inch guns. The muzzle blast knocked out the radios. Admiral Hill could not contact the carriers to find out why the airstrike has not started. USN support group west of Badio ordered to commence bombardment. Minesweepers USS Pursuit and Respite enter the mile-wide lagoon entrance to clear a 300-yard wide lane, laying buoys and smoke. Japanese shore guns fire on both ships. Commander Shiabatsky sends orders for all troops and guns to move from the ocean side of Badio to the lagoon. The support group is ordered to cease bombardment. Support group ordered to recommence bombardment. Many rounds landed between the island and the Fringe Reef. The 3 LVT and 2 LCVP waves leave the rendezvous area on schedule for the nearly 10-mile trip to the beach. The Kingfisher spotter reports the coral reef in the lagoon is exposed. Destroyer USS Ringgold enters the lagoon and engages the Japanese shore guns. After being hit twice by duds, one shore gun is spotted and its ammo dump hit, blasting the gun apart. Destroyer USS Dashiell enters the lagoon. Minesweeper USS Pursuit takes up position on the line of departure and points a searchlight seaward to guide the landing force into the lagoon. Their first wave is 24 minutes behind schedule because overloading, wind, sea, and the ebb tide slowed the LVTs from 4.5 to 2.5 knots. Planned time, first wave, is to leave the departure, but the 3 columns of LVT are half a mile behind, so H hour is slipped to 0845 and then again to 0900. 39 minutes late, the LVTs arrive at the USS Pursuit. The 3 columns of LVTs turn 70 degrees right, forming 3 landing waves 6,000 yards from the beach. Naval bombardment ordered stopped for the 2nd airstrike to start. LCVP lands 2nd Scout Sniper Platoon 2nd Regiment on the end of the pier on Beach Red 2. Using flamethrowers and demolition charges, the Japanese are cleared away. The first wave is 4,000 yards from the beaches. The 2nd airstrike ends. With the radios on USS Maryland again knocked out by gunfire, Admiral Hill has no way of knowing where the landing waves are. Tarawa is covered in dust from the shells and bombs plus smoke from fires. To avoid hitting the landing troops, he orders the bombardment to cease. Major General J. Smith, 2nd Mardev, protests ending the bombardment. The shelling, 10 tons of explosive per acre, destroyed almost all the above-ground gun positions, killed nearly half the troops on the island, and cut the shallow-laid phone lines, preventing Shaibatsky's direct control of his troops. Each Japanese unit will essentially act in isolation. With the pause in the naval bombardment, the Japanese man their firing pits, and their surviving 75mm and 70mm guns start firing at the Marines 3,000 yards from the shore with variable time fused shells. The shells blasted into fine dust instead of fragments, pelting the Marines with hot sand. The LVTs reach the Fringe Reef. Instead of being under 3 to 4 feet of water, 3/4 of the reef is dry. The LVTs cross the reef and go into the water, stunning the Japanese defenders. The 50 caliber machine gunners on the LVTs open fire, but most are quickly hit. About 200 yards from the beach, Japanese 75mm and 37mm guns and 13mm machine guns open fire. The boilerplate on the LVT-2s stopped 6.5mm rounds, but not the 7.7. Troops in knocked out LVTs go over the side and wade as much as 500 yards to Red 1 and 200 yards to the Red 2. The troops shed their heavy packs to reduce the 100-pound load they carry. The LVTs easily pass the pyramidal concrete obstacles and drive through the double apron wire fence. The first wave of landing team 3-2 lands on beach Red 1, encountering heavy defensive fires. The LVTs prove unable to climb the seawall. Marines who immediately climb out of the LVTs and drop to the beach 8 feet below have the greatest survival rate. The Japanese throw grenades into some LVTs. The engineers blast a hole in the seawall for tanks to go inland. First wave of landing team 2-8 is on beach Red 3 in good order. 2 LVTs find a gap in the seawall and embark their troops at the north edge of the airfield. First wave of landing team 2-2 arrives on beach Red 2. 2-2 and is pinned down by the seawall by heavy defensive fires. No radios are operative, so runners have to be used. Operational LVTs go back to the reef to carry in men from the LCVPs. After 5 hours of operation, many are nearly out of gas. LCMs with SPM from Weapons Company's 2nd Regiment head for Red 2. 1 LCM is sunk in the lagoon, 1 SPM drowned in a hole on the reef, and 1 SPM bogged in the sand near the beach. Other LCMs with SPMs are waved off. USS Ringgold and USS Dashiell in the lagoon fire on Japanese positions on beach Red 3. The air liaison party's TBY radios are soaked in the landing and did not work. The radios are disassembled and left to dry in the sun. The 20-man tank company reconnaissance platoon disembarks to mark the shallow route to the beach for the tanks. 17 of the guys become casualties. The LCMs and the 14 M4 tanks reach the reef. The 6 tanks of 1st Platoon and headquarters form a column and head in on the right flank of Red 1. The fire is so heavy, 2nd Platoon with 3rd Platoon lands with 3rd Platoon on Red 3, 8 tanks total. The 4 LCMs with light tanks from B Company, 2nd Tank Battalion, are hit and either sunk outright or withdraw, taking on water. 3-2 Commander in the 4th Wave is not able to make radio contact with the troops on Red 1, and with so few LVTs returning from the beach, orders troops on LCVPs to remain afloat. 2nd Regiment orders Reserve 1-2 Marines and LCVPs outside the barrier reef to land on Red 2 and attack west to assist 3-2 Marines. Landing Team 3-2 reports receiving heavy fire from all along the beach, unable to land, issue in doubt. Each Japanese unit carried out offensive actions according to prearranged plan. The Japanese forces close in on the Marines from the south, east, and west and press near the pier, where fierce close quarters combat ensued. Message from Commanding General 2nd Mardiv to Commanding General 5th Amphibious Corps. Successful landing on beaches 2 and Red 2 and Red 3. Toehold on Red 1. And committing 1 landing team from Division Reserve, still encountering strong resistance throughout. Headquarter M4 tanks, Sicilian Commando, reach Red 1. The beach and the seawall is littered with dead and wounded Marines. The tanks go back into the sea to avoid the Marines and destroyed LVTs. They drive west, find another break in the seawall, move inland shooting at Japanese troops. Then they encounter a Japanese Ha-Go tank. Sicilia is hit on the main gun muzzle. Commando destroyed the Ha-Go. Commando continued to support the Marines while Sicilia withdrew to the beach to inspect the damage and found the 75mm muzzle missing a chunk and the lands and grooves gouged. With just machine guns operational, Sicilia heads back into the action. The 3 tanks of 1st Platoon start to follow the headquarters tanks. 2 swamp and shell craters, and 3rd is out of action with a jammed main gun. 7 M4 tanks reach Red 3, pass through a gap in the seawall, and are waved forward by the battalion commander who yells, "Knock out all enemy positions encountered." The tanks quickly learned they could not destroy an enemy position by driving over it. Koga gets stuck in the shell crater. Clipper had an engine damage from a charge thrown on the rear deck. Anti-aircraft guns on the opposite side of the island hit Cannonball, Charlie, and Condor. Cannonball drove into an underground fuel dump and burned up. Colorado headed back for Red 3 to escape the gunfire. The RUGF aviation radios and the 4 surviving tanks are on different frequencies from each other, and the infantry MU, TBY, and TBX radios preventing communications. 2 M3A1 light tanks from B Company, 2nd Tank Battalion finally land on Red 3, but are quickly knocked out. The Marines on Red 1 and 3 suffered 50% losses. On Red 3, only 25 Marines have been lost. 3-8 Marines ordered to land on Red 3. Colonel David Shoup, 2nd Marine Regiment, lands on Red 2 and sets up his command post. Colonel Shoup sends Colonel Evans Carlson, an observer with the 2nd Marine Division, back to the flagship with messages due to trouble with radio communications. The close proximity of transmitters, receivers, and antennas on USS Maryland caused so much interference that reception and transmission is sporadic. Ashore, the supply of TNT to destroy the bunkers is nearly exhausted. Enough LVTs have assembled for 1-2 Marines to land A and B companies. C and Weapons Company have to wait ashore. Japanese fire hits the LVTs. 5 turn away and join 3-2 on the right flank of Red 1. The rest of 1-2 lands on Red 2. 1-2 Marines suffered 218 casualties. Japanese shore guns hit and destroy a dozen LCVPs carrying 3-8 Marines before they reached the Fringe Reef. Surviving 3-8 Marines wade 600 yards to Red 3. Companies suffer 70% losses. The naval gunfire and air attacks denuded the palm trees of their fronds and knocked many down, making it more difficult to see the Japanese. Message from Landing Team 38 to Commanding Officer 8th Marines. Third wave landed on Red 3, almost wiped out. Fourth wave landed, only a few men got ashore. 3rd Platoon Company B, 2nd Tank Battalion lands 4 tanks on Red 3. Message from Commanding General 2nd Marine Division to Commanding General 5th Amphibious Corps. Situation in doubt. Request release of 6th Marines from Corps Reserve. 3-2 Marines on the right flank of Red 1 report his force supported by tanks Commando and Cecilia had penetrated 500 yards from beach Red 1. The Marine infantry quickly figure out to cover the tanks and start clearing Japanese positions. Japanese guns gang up and knock out Commando. 3-8 Marines start landing on the end of the pier. The Marine line was generally along the seawall. The medium tanks allowed the Marines' lines to move north on Red 3 and on the right end of Red 2. The M4 tank Colorado returns to Red 3 and drives into the water far enough to be able to drive back and forth without hitting Marines and fire at the Japanese. After seeing Colorado drive into the sea, Colonel David M. Shoup's 2nd Marine Regiment sends a message to 2nd Marine Division headquarters. Stiff resistance, need half tracks, tanks no good. The Air Liaison Party TBY radios have dried out and gunfire and air support are requested. The Air Support Command Unit aboard USS Maryland called the carriers encountering the same radio problems placating Admiral Hill. Gunfire is limited to 5-inch because of how close the Japanese are. Air support is limited to fighter strafing runs for the same reason. The Marines cannot put out the colored panels, so some strafing hits Marines and a halt to airstrikes is called. Commander Siskowski and his staff abandoned the command post to allow it to be used as a shelter and care for wounded. As they prepare to move to the south side of the island, a U.S. Navy 5-inch shell explodes in their midst. Siskowski is badly wounded and most of his staff killed. The Inner South Seas Force units issued orders for Hawaii Operation Number 3. 3-2 Marines on the right edge of Red 1 orders his composite unit to pull back for the night and form a protective ring around Cecilia. U.S. airstrikes also hit Ocean, Gillette, and Callao Islands. Admiral Koga, CNC of the Combined Fleet, gives orders to execute Hawaii Operation Number 3. The enemy situation is clear. The land attack planes of the Northeast Area Fleet at Truk and all available air and submarine forces in the Marshall Islands will attack and will down the enemy fleet. Air units of the carrier divisions will advance to the Marshall areas and take part in the above assault. The Fleet Main Force and Fleet Advance Force will leave Truk 22 November to participate in the decisive battle at the proper time. The 12th Air Fleet will search ahead for the U.S. fleet. Ships of Inner South Seas Force will transport 2,300 soldiers of Army KO detachment from Ponape to Kwajalein, Marshall Islands, and when the opportunity arrives, make a forced landing at points in the Gilbert's area where the Americans landed and destroy their ground force. The 10th Cruiser Division's transport force cleared Truk by the end of the day to pick up the KO detachment. Cruiser Chickamauga and destroyer Nagasaki are ordered to return to Truk. 5,000 Marines are ashore, with 1,500 dead and wounded. 110 Marine 75mm pack howitzers arrive and they set up for action. Tankers work to ready China Gal, Cobra, Congo, and Colorado for operations. A number of Japanese swim out to wrecked LVTs in the lagoon and a Saidu Maru lying west of the main pier. The Japanese set up several new machine gun posts between Red 2 and 3 beaches. With the lack of central direction, the Japanese are unable to coordinate a counterattack. On Red 1, 3-2 Marines are ordered to secure Green Beach for the landing reinforcements. Inching their way forward, spotters direct naval gunfire on the pillboxes and gun emplacements, barring the way to Green Beach. 1-8 Marine disembarks on the Fringe Reef. As soon as the ramps come down, one Japanese machine gun on the dock to the left, 2 on the beach ahead, and 1 to the right when the sunken ship opened up. The Marines start wading 300 yards in shoulder-deep water to Red 2. The 4th wave with heavy equipment and vehicles are ordered to remain in the boats and circle out of range. The Marines on Red 2 and 3 with Cobra, Conga, and Colorado following pushed north, expanding the bulge near the airfield until it reached the southern shore, splitting the Japanese defense in two. In 60 seconds, Lieutenant Vale of China Gal and Major Ryan of 3-2 Marines on Red 1 figure out new tank infantry tactics. With the major obstacles reduced, China Gal and 3-2 Marines advanced to secure Green Beach. Cecilia drove into the water in a long Red 1, firing to the Japanese until it swamped in a shell hole. 1-8 Marines lost 230 men, all heavy equipment and radios, wading ashore to Red 2. The 630 surviving troops have to reorganize before entering combat. 1-6 Marines start loading into LCVPs and each towing 6 to 10 rubber boats. 2 LVTs with medical supplies, food, and water follow the last wave. Each B Company's 2nd Tank Battalion is ordered to land on Green Beach. At the Reef, 1,000 yards from Green Beach, 1-6 Marines climb into the 150 rubber boats and paddle ashore, passing over the mines. They receive machine gun fire, so an air attack is called in. The offending pillbox with 12 machine guns had a small tank of gasoline inside that was hit and burned out the position. The force landed without receiving further fire. All of 1-6 Marines have landed on Green Beach. 1 LVT hit a mine and was blown apart. Only 6 tanks of Company B, 2nd Tank Battalion, made it through 1,000 yards of high surf to Green Beach. The other LCMs withdrew and spent all night in the lagoon. The Marines controlled the west end of Badio, a fairly continuous line between Red 2 and Red 3 around the airfield aprons, and a perimeter on the south side against Black 2. Cobra swamped in a shell crater along Red 2. Congo was knocked out by a hit on the engine deck, and Colorado is back in the water off Red 3. 210 Marine artillery landed on Bayakari Island. 1-6 and 2-8 Marines organized for attacks with tanks preceding the columns of infantry companies by 10 to 15 yards. 2 flamethrowers are attached to each assault company. U.S. airstrikes hit Nili, Nauru, and Khalil Islands. The 10th Cruiser Transport Force arrived at Ponape and begins loading the KO detachment. The 2nd Marine Advance Force left truck to support the transport force. Admiral Koga decides to keep the battleships under truck's air defense. The carriers being in Japan training new air groups are not available. The carrier air groups and land-based aircraft that could cover the combined fleet and attack the U.S. fleet were wiped out at Revolve. USN screening destroyers report unidentified aircraft approaching. Commander Sayabowski sent a final message to Tokyo. Our weapons have been destroyed, and from now on, everyone is attempting a final charge. May Japan exist for 1,000 years. 1-6 Marines attacked west along the south coast starts. 8th Marines attacked the 3 mutually supporting bunkers between Red 2 and Red 3 for a 3rd day. A 60mm mortar round hit the roof of the coconut log bunker, penetrated, and detonated the ammunition. M4 Tank Colorado put a 75mm round through the steel bunker. With fire from the concrete bunker's many firing ports, stopping all efforts to surround it. An engineer squad raced on top. The Japanese charged out to attack the Marines and were cut down by flamethrower and carbine fire. As the engineers placed charges against the rear door, hundreds of Japanese ran out leading east. Rifle fire and a canister from Colorado killed most. 1-6 Marines reorganized for a new attack. 1 M3 tank is held at battalion headquarters to communicate with the leading China Gal and 6 M3s. Japanese 4th Fleet lost communications with Tarawa. 1-6 Marines advanced 300 to 400 yards, reaching the east end of the airfield, and formed a continuous line with 8 Marines where they are ordered to dig in for the night. About 50 Japanese launched a counterattack on 1-6 Marines. Small units infiltrated the Marine screening force in preparation for a full-scale assault. The assembling force is broken up by concentrated artillery fire. The infiltrators are dealt with by moving up rear echelon Marines. An attack by about 50 Japanese around 100 yards south of the airstrip was broken up by concentrated artillery fire. The transport force sails from Ponape for Kwajalein. After a special conference about the damage to the USS Independence, Admiral Nimitz sent a dispatch of instructions to Admiral Spruance to send the fast carriers to strike the Marshall Islands as soon as the opportunity arose, instead of holding them in a defensive position. Roughly 300 Japanese troops in a column 3 abreast launched a banzai charge along the South Beach into the lines of A and B Company 6th Marines. Heavy machine guns, first the 10 75mm pack howitzers, and the destroyers USS Schroeder and Sigsbee beat back the attack. Nearly 600 Japanese died before the assault was over an hour later. U.S. Navy screening vessels report unidentified aircraft approaching. Navy fighters and dive bombers, Marine artillery, and naval gunfire strike the Japanese positions on the eastern tip of the island. 3-6 Marines attacked, supported by M4 tanks Colorado and China Gal, 5 light tanks and engineers. 3-2 and 1-8 Marines attacked the Japanese pocket between Red 1 and Red 2. U.S. airstrikes pound Gillette Island. A small number of Japanese planes streak in low over the water and bomb Tarawa, plus drop 100 kilograms of food. The Japanese pocket between Red 1 and Red 2 was eliminated. Marines reached the eastern tip of Badio. At noon, the Marines have a formal flag raising ceremony. U.S. aircraft attacked Malacap and Greenwich Islands. 3 Japanese planes make a single pass attack on Tarawa. 10th Cruiser Transport Force with KO detachment arrives at Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Nippon Maru and Tora Maru refueling group depart Tarawa, escorted by 4 destroyers. USS Sea Raven torpedoes and sinks the Tora Maru north of Hanati. The Japanese advance force arrives at Kwajalein. The 2nd and 4th Fleet commanders meet and realize with the ships and aircraft available, it is impossible to launch the waylaying attack. The Japanese planes appear on radar of the U.S. fleet at Macon Atoll. A line of 10 yellow floating flashing lights is dropped on the horizon to mark the U.S. fleet. Tojo, the lamplighter, dropped parachute flares that increased visibility to about 12,000 yards. Rear Admiral Turner waited until the flares were about halfway down, where they illuminated the ship's best, and ordered an emergency turn away to minimize illumination. This was repeated about 30 times. 13 G4M bombers came in individually, 2 or 3 at a time, and many could not find the U.S. ships. USS North Carolina shot down a G4M and possibly a second. As the Combat Air Patrol, or CAP, started landing for the night, 3 groups of 6 to 8 Japanese planes appeared on radar. Japanese Emily scout plane shot down by the last CAP. Visibility is about 4,000 yards. USS Enterprise BAT team was vectored into the largest enemy air group by fighter direction officer. The 2 F-6F, guided by the radar-equipped TBF, made 10 attacks. 2 G4Ms were shot down and the rest scattered, preventing damage to U.S. ships. These are the first U.S. Navy radar-directed air-to-air victories. 1 F-6F was lost to Japanese fire. The 2-6 Marines had moved up through the remaining islands in the atoll and cleared the area of Japanese. The 2nd Marine Division started shipping out soon after. Questions?